So what's happening right now at Hokkyoji is the Compassionate Ocean Dharma Center, correct? That's Zen Center. Zen Center. Oh, Compassionate Ocean Zen Center is having an 8-day retreat here. And we're approaching the end. We're on day 7, and tomorrow will be our last day. And we've been studying in quite detail, the Anapanasati Sutra, which is, and we're using Thich Nhat Hanh's version, but I'm going to be using a couple other versions as well as Thich Nhat Hanh's. And so, translated by Glenn Wallace, he calls it present moment awareness of breathing. And I thought I'd start with a commentary by Glenn Wallace on this sutta. He says, how did Gautama become the Buddha? How did he come to know palpably that which is to be realized by the wise? How was he able to surmount the powerful detrimental surges of thought, speech, and action that overtake most of us, most always? How did the Buddha overcome the seemingly indeterminable unease, stress, tension, and pain that characterize our human existence? How, in asking this question? There is no need to restrict it to the Buddha. How will you come to know palpably those things? How will you become a Buddha? It seems to be very simple. Just practice meditation. And it seems to be terribly difficult. Just practice meditation. So, it's not his whole introduction, but I'm just reading excerpts from it. So I'm going to go on a little more about a commentary by him, another 3 paragraphs. One of Buddha's favorite metaphors for the practice that we refer to as meditation is bhavana, which is translated cultivation. We see this word many, many times in the sutra. He certainly had in mind the ubiquitous farms and fields of his native India when employing this image. Thus, unlike meditation or contemplation, the Buddha's term is musty, rich, verdant. It smells of the earth, the commonness of his chosen term. It would have resonated with a farmer, suggested naturalness, everydayness, ordinariness. The term also suggested hope. No matter how fallow it has become or damaged, it may be a field can always be cultivated, endlessly enhanced, enriched, developed to produce a favorable and nourishing harvest. Now, while it is true that anyone may attempt to cultivate a field, not everyone will succeed. Cultivation, like anything else, requires specific skills. So the question in identifying ability is twofold. What skills are required, and to what extent have they been cultivated? The task that concerned the Buddha, of course, was not the cultivation of fields, but the cultivation of the mind. So the primary set of skills he taught involved the practiced cultivation of deep mental, emotional, and physical calm and penetrative insight into the actual nature of one's lived experience. I'm going to stop for a moment, and we have a neighbor who's a farmer, and he's been very, very generous with Hokkyoji, very generous. We are very, very lucky to have him as our closest neighbor. His name is Bob, and I really admire Bob for many reasons, but I'll tell you one reason that's coming up right now is that he really attends very closely to his business of cultivating crops. There's a very specific time when you have to do a certain activity when you're farming. And if you miss that opportunity, you're really going to mess your crop up. So he just takes care of it every day, attending to that. And while you won't ever find Bob in this lifetime, I believe, sitting on a cushion at a zendo, his main meditation is sitting on his tractor. So he does a lot of that, and I think he's very attentive to it. The last paragraph that I'm going to read in Glenn Wallace's introduction to this sutta is, once when the Buddha was emerging from 3 months' seclusion, he made a comment that seems to me to be of real significance for our understanding of Buddhist meditation. I suspect that some of the Buddha's followers have been wondering just what he was doing for all that time, deep in the forest. Perhaps followers of other teachers had been inquiring into the matter. In any case, the Buddha's followers had been inquiring into the matter. Oh, no, I said that. In any case, the Buddha's followers apparently wanted to know what they should say when others inquired about the Buddha's activities. The Buddha's response was, "Tell them that I dwell in concentration on and present moment awareness of the breath." So for 3 months, that's what he did. Just concentrated on the breathing. I'm going to back up a minute and say that Glenn Wallace is in his commentary. He calls this, his commentary, he calls How to Meditate. How to meditate. Because some of us might be a little confused about how to actually do that. He goes on to say, people might say, breathing, just that's all you were doing for 3 months, just cultivating on your breathing? What, isn't that a little lame? Or too simple? But indeed, we do find that Buddha considered this kind of meditative practice to lead to awakening. I'm going to tell a little anecdote. Sometime, I believe in the late 1970s, I think I've got the time right, Katagiri Roshi asked his students to give talks in the morning before Zazen. And we began Zazen at 5 o'clock a.m. And he didn't adjust the schedule to be a little later. He said, well, we'll give the talk before Zazen. So we started at 4:30 in the morning. And you needed to end your talk by about 5 to 5. And then we'd settled in for Zazen for an hour and a half. Now, one thing I can tell you absolutely for certain from my own experience is that you do not want to try to be funny or crack a joke at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, you just get some very bad scowls. So that was my personal experience. However, I was sitting close to Joanne O'Neill, who was present in our assembly. And we were speaking on the Zazen, Fukan Zazengi. We were just using that as only that text to give a talk from. And there's a line that says in the Fukan Zazengi that says, breathe gently through your nose. And so it was Joanne's time to give her talk. And she says, I'm going to talk on breathe gently through the nose. And I kind of went, oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How can anyone give a talk for 25 minutes on how to breathe gently through your nose? That was my first response. And this is just too, I don't know. So anyway, but in the long run, I deeply appreciated her talk. I remember that. I don't know what she said, but however, when it was over, I felt appreciation for it. Then, also in the Fukan Zazengi, it says, the Zazen I speak of, Dogen says, the Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. Now, the way I first learned that translation of the Fukan Zazengi, it said the Zazen I speak of is not step-by-step meditation. And a little bit for me, that maybe resonates about what he's talking about. It says it's not learning meditation. You think, well, don't you just learn how to meditate? I mean, nothing wrong with that. But the more specific meaning is that it's not step-by-step meditation, not like this step-by-step, moving forward, progressing. If we have that idea that we're moving in steps while we're meditating, we won't be doing the true practice of what we aspire to do. I'm going to read another passage. This one's by Seke Harada Roshi. And he calls it the problem with Shinkantaza. I'll just read. For some time, there have been teachers in Japan, United States, and Europe who have taught that it is a mistake to have a goal in the practice of Zazen. This is the way most people think of Zen these days. These teachers, though, are mistaken. The reason is that they don't know that perception arises after the fact, after reality. They set up an idea of not having a goal beforehand. They think that Zazen is a condition where you need not do or think anything. They think it is reality itself. They think that because the thought exists, the reality also exists. But it is clear that even if you sit for many years this way, there will always be a feeling of something missing. The condition that is variously described as shikan, as it is, suchness, or nothing to realize, nothing to attain, is something that becomes before perception. Therefore, when those teachers say that you should not have a goal and tell people to just do Shinkantaza, the problem is that person who hears that instruction perceives just or single-mindedly. In this way, he or she practices Zazen with the thought of Shinkan, or just sitting. By doing this, the person will never become one with Shinkan. As long as there is anything like sitting or Zen or practice existing, even in the slightest degree, you will never be able to find satisfaction. So I think Genpo Michael O'Neill has a pretty good understanding of this, because I've noticed in recent years he's really particularly focused on what do we do in Zazen. What do we actually do? I think both of us have the understanding, having practiced this for many, many years, that, yeah, we can get kind of comfortable sitting in Zazen, and we can just kind of sit there and let our mind roam around. And, it'll appear like, well, we're doing Zazen. Maybe people believe we're doing real Zazen, but maybe we're not all the time. Thich Nhat Hanh emphasizes the mindfulness of breathing sutra, emphasizes that we start with just breathing, aware of breathing in, aware of breathing out. And we progress through breathing in, through the whole body. We become aware of our whole body, breathing in and breathing out. And Thich Nhat Hanh suggests we don't have to do the whole exercise as breathing in, I'm fully aware of breathing in, breathing out, I'm fully aware I'm breathing out. He suggests you can just go in, out. I have to say, in my own experience, this is a little bit of confession. I hope I don't get fired, but of the 10% of the time I'm doing Zazen that I feel I'm actually doing Zazen, that's all I do. It's just in, out, of breathing, but it's really there. And that's all. And then there might be, of that 10%, there might be another 10% where in and out drops away. Just there, but that's like 1%. And that might be an exaggeration. Furthermore, in this mindfulness of breathing, the Buddha suggests we breathing in, experiencing all of our feelings. Well, feelings in this case just means what's pleasant and unpleasant, and what's neutral. It's a basic, very basic. And then further goes on to mind. What the mind, looking at all the states of our mental formations. And I'm going to, well, let's see, what am I going to do? First, I'm going to read what the Anapanasati Sutra says, and then I'd like to go to the foundations of mindfulness. The Anapanasati Sutta says, I shall breathe in and out, experience the mind. I shall breathe in and out, gladdening the mind. I shall breathe in and out, concentrating the mind. I shall breathe in and out, liberating the mind. That's a condensation. And this is one of my favorite passages. I have lots of favorite passages, but this is one of them. And this is how the Satipatthana Sutra speaks of this, how we contemplate the mind. Satipatthana is the four establishments of mindfulness, and one of them is the mind. And how does a practitioner abide contemplating mind as mind? Here, a practitioner understands mind affected by lust as mind affected by lust. Understands mind affected by hate as a mind affected by hate. Understands mind affected by delusion, affected by delusion. And a mind unaffected by delusion, unaffected by delusion. Understands contracted mind as contracted mind, distracted mind as distracted mind. Understands exalted mind as exalted mind, and unexalted mind as unexalted mind. Understands surpassed mind as surpassed mind, and understands unsurpassed mind as unsurpassed mind. Understands concentrated mind as concentrated mind, understands liberated mind as liberated mind, and unliberated mind as unliberated mind. So what I appreciate about this is it doesn't seem like there's any judgment going on. There's no clearly there's a progression. And how does, by contemplating mind as mind, understands a mind affected by lust as a mind affected by lust. It also says a mind unaffected by lust as a mind unaffected by lust. So it goes from lust, just continually grasping after things that we just want, and this kind of lust is different from just sexual lust. It's like lusting for food or just wanting a better stereo, just a continual wanting, better car. I hesitate when I say that because I really want a better car. Earlier, a couple days before this retreat began, I had my first accident in an automobile with another vehicle. I've had a couple by myself, but I backed in, just in a parking lot in the post office, and it was a diagonal thing where I'm backing up. I turned and looked, but the car was in that place where the roof support is. I didn't see it, and I bumped into it, put a little dent in the other car, and broke my tail light. Anyway, I need one of those cars with the camera backup things. I really need that. Okay, and I need every other safety feature that they have these days. Blind spots, blink, blink, blink. Everything else, changing lanes, whatever. Trouble is, they're so expensive. So, but the real part that I appreciate this is about contracted mind as contracted mind and distracted mind as distracted mind. One person, when I read this, came to me later, and I had read this, and they said, wait, when you said contracted mind, that really hit me. It's like, understands contracted mind as when your mind contracts. He says, I really got that. And then it gets better and better for me, understanding exalted mind is exalted mind. So exalted mind is just exalted mind. You don't get all caught up with it. And unexalted mind is unexalted mind. Okay, I'm having I would say, call this a pretty exalted mind, but it's not quite as good as the other exalted mind I had yesterday, something. So this is, and that's, it goes on even further where he says, I understand surpassed mind as surpassed mind. In other words, I think that means, surpassed. Yeah, well, that means you've surpassed everything, right? So I understand surpassed mind is completely surpassed mind. This is it, surpassed mind. But you don't really label it, or it's just what it is. It's just what it is. And understands unsurpassed mind as unsurpassed mind. So we're not getting all caught up in how wonderful our mind is. We're just observing it through our breathing. Okay. Then, finally, okay, then we reach the last section of the development in the breathing sutra. The practitioner trains, I shall breathe in and out, contemplating impermanence. In and out, contemplating fading away. In and out, contemplating cessation. In and out, contemplating relinquishment. Thich Nhat Hanh uses letting go, but I'm more fond of relinquishment. And now, and I previously had told the story quite often that Joan conveyed to me, and this was verbally. And I retold it the other day at our study period, and I found out I really messed it up because it's been written down in a book. And she read it at our Chosan meeting, our morning discussion. And I'd like to ask you to read it again. We heard it once, but I'd like to have you read it again. I have it here for you. And will you be able to see okay?
Should I stand next to you?
Yeah, you could stand. I don't know if you need this light. You could do this. Or can you read okay? And we're going to put, you could, if you can read okay, and can you read okay in the chair? Okay, why don't you move there and we'll turn the camera around and have it face you. What happened? Okay, okay. There you go. Okay. Now you have to look here if you look. If you look, this will give the people at home a feeling that you're looking at them.
Okay. When I was in my early 40s, I decided I wanted to do monastic practice. My teacher encouraged me to go to Japan or Tassajara, but someone I had met on a retreat at Joshua Tree in California suggested I go to Amaravati Buddhist Monastery in England. This was before the internet, and I couldn't find out much about it. But I got the idea it was a Theravadan Buddhist women's monastery. For some reason, I decided that was where I wanted to go. So with my teacher's somewhat hesitant blessing, I flew to England. When I got there, I was surprised to see so many tall, masculine-looking nuns. But as it turned out, this was a monastery for both men and women. There was a young Thai woman at Amaravati while I was there. She had been a postulant at the monastery, then disrobed and moved to London, where she discovered she had advanced lung cancer. She had come back to Amaravati to reordain and to die. All of us were called upon to take care of her in shifts. I remember when I first went to her room, I was frightened because I didn't know her and I had never been with someone who was dying. She patted the space beside her on her bed and said, "Don't be afraid, sister. I'm not." Shortly thereafter, she became quite ill and began to go downhill at a rapid rate. I was in her room one day attending to her with one of the senior monks. She was draped over a chair, struggling to breathe. Many people had been encouraged her to let it go since she had returned to the monastery, and she had been trying her best. But at that moment, she called out in despair, "I can't let it go, Bhante. I can't let it go." He replied, "Then let it come. Let it come." At that, she was able to open and be supported by the waves of life and death, coming and going, beyond life, beyond death. A short time later, she was very close to death and had announced that this was going to be the night that she would depart. The whole monastic community gathered in her room, sitting and chanting. An altar was set up at the end of her bed with a single candle burning. Then we heard a roar of motorcycles in the parking lot, followed by the sound of boots stomping in the hall. A group of young Thai men from London, friends of hers, had come down. They burst into the room and cried out, "Don't die, sister, don't die." She sat up in bed and told the rest of us all to go, as she had decided not to die that night. She needed to take care of her friends. She died peacefully the next evening. So many times through the years, I have heard that monk's voice say, "Then let it come, sister, let it come. I try my best."
That's okay. I realized I forgot to give Joan the microphone. I hope you are all able to hear okay. Were you able to hear? Can you give me a thumbs up if you could? Okay, great, great. Well, I'm basically gonna think that's a good place to end. If you could switch to gallery view.
Yes, I
Kyoko.
shall.
Now we'll open it up for some questions, if anyone, or comments, whatever anyone has to say, either here or the folks at home.
Okay, this is a wonderful passage from a wonderful biography in 6 short pages by Joanne. Why did you choose this particular reading? We were fortunate to hear it a second time.
Your question is, why did I choose the Joanne's reading for
Yes.
the? Yeah, okay. Very specifically, it was related to the Thich Nhat Hanh translation of Letting Go. And not that I'm actually critical of Thich Nhat Hanh, just that we just hear that so much. And I think part of it, we discussed this earlier, but I think Thich Nhat Hanh, when he writes, he tries to make it in very vernacular readings, that many people can access. That's what I think. But And for me, kind of relinquishment has more of that feeling than letting go, just because I hear letting go so much. So relinquishment, you don't hear that very often. So it suggests something different. And I think it suggests what this story that Joanne just recited to us, that relinquishing is, it's not doing one thing or the other. It's not trying to let something go that can't be let go of, or it's not like kind of chasing or things. It's like, well, we just relinquish that striving or that effort. And sometimes there's just very, very painful things in our lives, and we have to relinquish trying to control it. And sometimes that phrase, let it go, is kind of a way to control it. Not always. For instance, I quite often tell the story of Zen Master Joshu, who a monk approached him and said, what do we do when the 10,000 things in the world come crashing in on us? And his response was, don't try to control it. So to me, that's relinquishment. You know, in the midst of severe pain or troubles, we just try not to control it by thinking about it, analyzing it. I mean, we do that. But ultimately, we just have to let all that pain from something that happened, grief or whatever, just let it penetrate us totally. So that's why I like this story. Yeah, Mary.
Thank you, Dokai. I would really love a copy, a way to print off the story that you just read, that Joanne, I'm sorry, just read. I think that it was really, really powerful for me. On a couple levels. One is I'm reading the book right now, The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson. And I don't know if anybody has read that book, but it's about England, Churchill and his family, but really England in the 1940s when Germany bombed England during the major onslaught between like June and I'm now into September. And one of the things that happened was, you can imagine people in London, once the German fighters and the bombers came by the hundreds and filled the sky and bombed London and England, day and night, over and over, day after day, to decimate that country. The author talks about individual people. 71% of people stayed in their homes. They didn't go to bomb shelters or didn't have a place to go. And what many people would do would just come out in the street during the bombing to look up at the sky with a sort of resolve. I mean, if you can imagine, it's like they're stuck, but they had a common resolve that they looked at this with both horror, knowing that they could be dead, because 100% of the time people died. And then also this idea of looking at the sky and kind of this magnificent light show going on, like splendor. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think of that mindset of knowing you could die at any moment, and then just the resolve of, well, okay, this is it. There was something else about community, you could say there. But what I want to say, in addition to that, was that you can imagine some people were basically, you can't let it go when you're in that setting, right? You have to say, well, just let it come. And people who are in all sorts of really difficult times in their life, whether it be a mental health crisis or dying, or when you hear this, let it go, it's like a command. It just seems so, I'm like you, I'm tired of that phrase. I love, just let it come. Because then there's release. That's just how I like to think of it. Just, it's not giving up. It's just, hey, let it come. There's no turning away.
Thank you, Mary. I'll remember to send you a copy of that story. Any other comments? Either Kika.
If we have time.
Yeah, hang on. Let me
Thank you.
turn the camera.
I don't know if you have to do that.
Well,
Yes, we do. This is a high-tech operation.
It is. Okay, there you go.
So two questions, one of them a quick question.
Okay.
I believe you were quoting Glenn Wallace's translation of the Anapanasati Sutta that we've been studying?
I think so. I might have been translating Bhikkhu Bodhi's. I had it copied, so I'm not sure when I went from one to the other.
Okay, I was just curious. I don't remember if that's in his book, The Basic Teachings of the Buddha, or not.
The sutta is.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that book is Basic Teachings of the Buddha.
Mhm.
Okay. The second question is, I really liked your early translation that you shared of the line in Fukan Zazengi, that this is not step-by-step meditation. And of course, what we're studying in the Anapanasati Sutta, at least ostensibly, initial appearances could be taken as a step-by-step practice. And this was actually a question that I was going to ask and hadn't quite gotten around to, is like, are we, or I guess maybe I can just ask, would you like take this as a step-by-step practice, or?
Okay. That's not an easy question to answer.
Sorry, that's why I said that wasn't a question.
But I think that's kind of the whole point that we're working with. How is it that the Anapanasati Sutra is not exactly step-by-step meditation? I think just from my own experience, I usually just have to start with my breathing when I'm sitting down. It doesn't matter if I'm in sesshin and I've done 50 periods of zazen that week and I'm doing my 51 first. It's like I have to start with just attending to my breath. I mean, that's just what I do. But and you know, it might be breathing in, breathing out, just in, out, and then after a little while, I don't really need the in, out label. You know, it's just happening. And I think even though we're talking about the breathing, we're not talking about the breathing as a particular thing. It's not a particular, it might seem like it when we begin or when we study it. We might think of it as an idea, okay. But if we actually practice it, that breathing will totally transcend the breathing itself. You're kind of looking up in the air like there's some doubt. You can't see him on camera. Folks at home can't see his expression, but he's kind of saying,
Well, I'm a little short on sleep is the main.
Short on sleep. Short on sleep. That's, you know,
excuse.
during a Hokyoji practice period, when we have Chosan, we spend the first 15 minutes talking about how we slept last night. So anyway, go ahead.
Could you maybe just say that part again, since I didn't quite absorb all of it?
Okay.
I apologize for the request.
Okay. So I'm just saying, essentially, we do the breathing practice and yeah, okay, we start with, okay, I'm here, I'm doing Zazen, you know, we're kind of aware of that. Then we settle, you know, into the breathing and, you know, okay, breathing in, breathing out, in, out. But we're right there with our breathing. It's not, we're not bouncing around. We're just right there with the breathing.
Right.
And then the breathing stops being a concept. It just there, it's just happening, along with everything else in the world. And at that time, the actual practice transcends any concept of it. It's true.
The actual
I mean, I know that from
practice-
experience, not very much experience, but a little bit.
The
So does it Michael and John
Yes.
and Kyoku. Kyoku's in the corner for the people at home.
We'll see you later.
Yeah, I'll show you right now. There she is, in the distance, but wave, okay. Okay, anything else, Kika? Sorry,
No, that's
sorry to
helpful.
interrupt you.
No, that's fine. So the actual practice, you were saying the actual practice transcends any concept of the practice.
Of that particular
Of that
practice.
particular practice.
It changes. It's something that just evolves as we go deeper and deeper into it.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from people at home or in the assembly here? Gimpa, did you have something? This time I'm going to go a little slowly so you can see everybody in the assembly here.
This is
Sorry for the jerkiness. Let's see, I'll try to do this smoothly. This key, see, it's like a pan shot. And now this is going to be a zoom. Yeah, all right.
if this Zen thing doesn't work out, you have.
I've got another career lined
you
up.
can be kind of a roadie, you know.
I've got about 3 of them.
Okay.
One's a Zen comic, and then another is a Zen cook. I've been told. And now I can actually be a Zen cameraman. So
Very good. So, okay, I have a question, but let me tell one little story that I got clarified by Tejo Munich when we had a joint session on Zoom about a year ago or 2 years ago now. But anyway, she told a story that she had practiced with Katagiri Roshi. Most of you know Tejo Munich. She is one of the Dharma heirs of Katagiri Roshi, and we all practiced together for many years. Anyway, so she had spent quite a bit of time listening to Katagiri Roshi and practicing, and then she went and practiced with Harada Roshi that Dokai-san referred to. She practiced for many months maybe, at his monastery in Japan. And she heard him say what Zazen was. And it seemed different from what she had been hearing from Katagiri Roshi. And so when she came back, she met with Hojo-san, with Katagiri Roshi, and said, Hojo-san, when I was in Japan, Harada Roshi said, as I understood it, that Zazen was such and such, and I thought, from what I had heard from you, that Zazen was so and so. So what is the right understanding of Zazen, or something like that? And she reports that his response was, no one knows what Zazen is. I think that's very helpful, actually, that when we think, oh yeah, as soon as we think, I know what Zazen is, Zazen has turned into a learned meditation. It's now, anyway, so that's the point. Excuse me for taking up the time on that. But my question is, did Seke Harada Roshi, can you summarize simply what the point he was making in his article or on the problem with Zazen? Shikantaza, the problem with Shikantaza. What was his point in that?
I think it's exactly as you were saying. When we create a concept of shikantaza, of kind of not doing anything, then we're turning shikantaza into a concept, just like you were saying, like for Katagiri Roshi's response is no one knows. So I think he was talking about that when I read it.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're right at the last part. We got 2 minutes left. I'd like to share a little story. I guess I'll sit back down again. When we were in Plum Village, and that means Joan-san, Gempos, and Mark Rice, and myself, and Brent, Shujo, Brent, yeah, there were 5 of us from this Minnesota or the Minneapolis area that went there. And there were like 700 people, something like that. And so I felt I had 2 tiny personal encounters with Thich Nhat Hanh. At least it felt that way to me. One was we were going on a walking meditation together, like 700 of us. And, walking to me was like, okay, I'll do it. So I was kind of waiting for people to assemble. And I went into the bookshop there and found a lot of interesting books I was looking at. And lo and behold, Thich Nhat Hanh comes into the bookshop and he looks at me and he says, "It's time for walking." I was more curious about looking at all the fascinating books. So that was one. And the other one was we related stories about all the yogic training I had to do to get a a front row seat. And I'm sure, now this one's a little speculative, whether it's personal or not, but I was sitting in the front row, and this was like 5 or 6 times, and I did my best to do my best zazen I've ever done. Just sit there, not move, not look up at him, not look around, just sit there quietly. I couldn't sit for a whole hour and a half, so I just shift my legs one time. And I think, by the 3rd or 4th time, he kind of knew I was there. And he came up and stood right in front of me. And I didn't look up. I just saw his feet. And he said, there might be some of you who do another practice than I do. He said, you might think I like your practice or I don't like it. He says, it's both the same. So whether we like something or dislike, somehow I felt he was, for 6 or 7 seconds, I thought he was kind of, I'm sure he knew I was a Zen person. I mean, a Japanese Zen person. And so anyway, I might be speculating on that, as we all sometimes do. Oh, he was talking directly to me. But at least for less than 10 seconds, I kind of felt he was. Way less than 10 seconds, maybe 7. So, so anyway, okay, we're at 10:32, and we have passed our ending point, of which we're quite strict at maintaining. So thank you so much for joining us today, all you folks at home. And we look forward to seeing you next week when, maybe Kyoku, you want to give the announcement about next week, what we're planning to do. Do you have one?
I've got a thermojiggy, and
Here, I'll put the
you're
camera
gonna
on.
do your new occupation and skill development here.
Whoops, I don't know which button.
Okay, I have to look at you. So here's the deal. Next week, we are going to join MZMC, either in person or on Zoom, to help celebrate the 50th anniversary. That information and links to the MZMC anniversary we'll put on the web. So before the end of the week, it'll be out there. So you can come to the usual Hokioji spot, or you can just go to MZMC. Their meditation will start at 9:10. And then at 10, there will be a panel of spiritual leaders who will give a presentation. So we're just going to join with that crowd, and then we'll resume our usual schedule and the usual stuff we do back here on the 3rd Sunday in September. Also coming up is the MZMC Sesshin here later in September, starting on the 20th. You can go to their website if you'd like to participate in that. And then we've got in October a Caring for the Land weekend, our men's retreat, 2nd time in a row. And then in November, we've got Just Sitting, which is a group that's led by Lee Lewis, doing a sesshin where nobody can tell you what to do, as they tell each other at the beginning of that sesshin. And then we'll also have a work weekend in November. So thank you, Dokai, for bringing us in, and all of our support talkers during the question and answer. And let's do our vows. I think you know that we really appreciate your donations and your mentions on Facebook, because I know that you're all rabid social media people. And let's do our vows and say goodbye until next week. I need my bell. I'll be right back. Oh, you've got the bell? Okay. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. May your life go well.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you on Zoom.
Bye-bye.